Ryan here, and the subject of this video is right in the center. That is the Smith & Wesson SD9VE for value enhanced. The styling on the SD looks a lot like an earlier gun that was put out by Smith & Wesson, and that gun was the Sigma. The reason I have a Glock and a HS2000 Springfield Armory XD, essentially before Springfield Armory bought it, the reason I have those out on the table is that I'm going to explain the inner workings of this gun and use those for comparison because they're very similar. Well, the Sigma was almost a copy of the Glock, and they essentially made changes. They didn't make enough changes. Glock sued Smith & Wesson and forced them to change the design. The original SW9F and SW40F had to be changed, and they were changed numerous times. There's Fs, there's Gs, there's VEs, there's Cs, different names for it. And then eventually they ditched the whole design, essentially, and incorporated a lot of the features into a gun called the SD9. And when the SD9 started competing with their M&P series, because it looked very similar, they made it a little less desirable, and thus we get the SD9 value enhanced. So I'm going to clear all three pistols so that you can see that no internet bullets are going to strike you or me. Empty. Empty. Them internet bullets are very dangerous. You gotta be careful. Empty. So overall, all three of these guns are similar in size. The Glock 19 is actually slightly smaller in a few dimensions, not by much though. Height is where the difference is the most. The Smith & Wesson SD9VE has a 16-round magazine. The Glock has a 15-round magazine. Therein lies the difference in the height of the guns. There's one additional round. Now, when you actually back the chambers up and try and get those aligned perfectly, you can see the barrel lengths are identical. The Smith & Wesson sticks back a little bit further, and that gives you more of a beaver tail, and it's frankly a very comfortable grip. Although Glock opted for a plastic-coated, metal-lined magazine. This is one of the original partial metal-lined magazines. Smith & Wesson decided they'd one-up Glock. They decided they'd use an all-metal magazine. You see welded at the back. It's actually it seems like a good quality magazine. I kind of like the design on it. Retained in a standard way with a little retainer, and then the magazine floor plate will slide off. It's got this crazy long heel in the front, very similar to the HS2000. So there we have the magazines. The XD, the original XD9, HS2000, again same gun. We'll compare those as well, and as you can see, for those of you who know the XD, identical barrel length. The XD9 is essentially identical in size to oops, wrong bag again. Getting these confused. Identical in size to the SD, height-wise. Almost identical. So what they did is Springfield Armory wanted a middle ground between the Glock 17 and Glock 19. They didn't want as many models. Really, the Glock 17 was a little bit too big, and I guess they thought the grip on the Glock 19 was a little bit too short, so they thought they'd go with just right. And it works. The grip on the Smith & Wesson is narrower, much like the XD. It's difficult to tell from the top shot here, but believe me, the grip actually feels a lot narrower. And as evidence, there's these little thumb indents here, and they make the grip feel a lot smaller because the ball of your trigger finger goes in there, and of your thumb goes in here. You got kind of a thumb rest thing going on. They've got a place for you to put your finger here. You know, styling's all pretty neat, and the gun feels slimmer. It points more like a Glock than say a 1911. It's got a more steeply raked grip frame than the 1911, if I remember correctly. I don't have a 1911 out, so can't tell you that. One thing that they did that I like on the SD is they finally added a standard Glock style rail. The original Sigma had the proprietary style. It had grooves, but you couldn't slide anything on. You had to have a different clamping system. Hardly anybody has Smith & Wesson accessories even to this day. Heckler & Koch also did the same thing. They have a similar rail system up here that's closed at the front, so you have to clamp something around it. A company that makes safety locks, trigger locks, came along and bought out Smith & Wesson. The Smith & Wesson takes down like a Glock. Pull the trigger, hope that you haven't just killed your neighbors, and slide the slide off. I'm gonna run out of room here, so the Springfield Armory, same thing. Got to pull the trigger. Although I think they've got that changed on newer ones, where you don't have to pull the trigger. And the Glock again, dangerous, silly, but yeah, you got to pull the trigger. So when you look at these guns side by side, I'm going to compare the Glock first. They're both striker fired. They both have very similar features. So you got your striker here, rear plate, the plunger here for the firing pin block safety, your blocks for your cam blocks for the barrels are the same, real similar recoil spring. To this day, the gun, at least the upper, is very similar. You've got a roll pin holding the extractor on in this model, whereas they've got a spring and a plunger going back here, so the extractor is retained in a more logical manner there. They've got the serrations on the front here. I don't press check my gun, so I don't see that as an advantage, but some people do. I try to remember whether or not my gun is loaded through my manual of arms rather than through actually manually checking it. Smith & Wesson does not have a loaded chamber indicator that's tactile. You have to look in that hole and hope you can see something. It's like, oh my goodness, there's brass in there. Hard to do in low light, impossible to do in low light. Whereas on the Glock, the newer Glocks, you can feel if the extractor is flush. It should be an empty chamber. Not always. Silly things like these loaded chamber indicators are like I said, silly. If you don't know your gun is loaded, you're doing something wrong. If you have to check this and trust that it's going to work, you're doing something wrong. The Springfield Armory is a bit of a different design. Not a whole lot though. They're still striker fired. They have a striker cocked indicator that comes out the back. They have a loaded chamber indicator. This one actually sticks up a good bit when there's a cartridge in the chamber, and you can tell again by feeling, and you can even look if you could see over the sights. You can look and you can see that it's up. Doesn't always guarantee that if it's flush there's nothing in the chamber, but it's better than nothing. So in terms of features, this was a bit ahead of its time. All the different functions of it are identical though, so it's not really a big departure from Glock, but it was more of a departure, and enough of a departure. See the extractors inside there, there's nothing external on it. it was enough of a departure that the Glock, of course, wouldn't be able to sue Smith and or Springfield Armory or HS Industries, as the case may be, in order to recover any damages, because they really didn't copy the Glock. Okay, let's look at lowers. Notice the HS 2000, even before it was a Springfield Armory XD, had a dual captive recoil spring, all steel, solid, and it worked well. So you had lower recoil in the Springfield Armory XD when Springfield Armory finally won the rights to import that gun. So lowers, very similar. You've got the